Hi everyone, in this video I'll be converting a Legion-specific Chaos Lord for the Word Bearers. When starting this conversion video I had a number of things to consider, such as what defines the Legion. I managed to boil it down to parchment, candles and possessed. I have experience working with possessed models, so I figured it wouldn't be too hard to create a Chaos Lord that used to be a possessed marine, but managed to tame the beast and regain control, similar to an Exalted 8-bound or the Galvor back from the Horus Heresy. In order to start the conversion, I had to plan out which kits to use, and I decided on 4 kits: the World Eater's Jakhals, Chaos Space Marines Possessed, and Chosen, and then finally the Cataphractii Terminators kit from the Horus Heresy. There is also some sculpting work later on, so you'll need your sculpting medium of choice if you want to follow those steps. To create the body, I used my snips to cut off the body of the Dishonored from the Jakhals kit, and the legs of one of the Possessed. Now, I personally used parts from the Shadow Spear Possessed, however any choice of Possessed should work here. After cleaning them up, I moved the legs to the side and separated the jackal body from its legs below the belt line using my heavy-duty scalpel to ensure I had better control over this part. Once I had separated them, I cleaned up the cuts with my normal scalpel, used plastic cement to glue the 2 halves together, and began dry fitting the legs and torso, then making any adjustments till they are fitted together seamlessly. In my case, I had to cut a divot in the waist of the possessed legs in order to fit the lower spike of the Dishonored's belt buckle. I then decided the body should be pinned together in order to maximise the strength of the bond. I did this by taking my pin vise and a paper clip, then drilling 2 holes, one in the legs and one in the torso. However, I could use green stuff or milliput in order to ensure that there is a strong enough bond between the 2 parts. I then applied super glue to the one end of the paper clip and attached it to the inside of the legs, before then cutting it down to size and dry fitting the torso on. When I realised I had the right length, I then applied super glue to the torso and then stuck them together with some plastic cement around the join of the 2 plastic parts. I then let it dry for half an hour before moving on. When deciding on the weapon options, I figured that due to the Word Bearers having a historically good affinity with melee rules, I would give this Lord 2 melee weapons, a Power Fist and a Power Sword. First, the Power Sword. In order to bring the possessed aspect back towards the model, I once again looked at the possessed kit and used the fleshy sword with the pipe going into it. After cleaning it up with a scalpel, I went into the Cataphractii Terminators kit for a Power Fist. I settled on one of the lightning claws, as I could proxy it as a Power Fist that looked suitably more vicious. I also grabbed the 2 parts of the shoulder pads and removed any leftover sprue tabs and mold lines with my scalpel again. Next, to cover the hole in the back of the model, I grabbed a Power Plant from the Possessed kit. Again, this is from the Shadow Spear box set, however any Possessed Power Pack would work, and cleaned it up. Lastly, for the head, I chose to go with this helmet from the Chaos Chosen kit due to it looking more demonic than that of the standard marine helmet. After dry fitting the head to the torso, I realised several things. I needed to cut the neck off of the head. I did this by placing my snips on the second rung down in the ribbing and cutting it off before shaving the cut down slightly more carefully with my scalpel. Secondly, that the neck was too high up on the torso, so I shaved that down, dry fitting it every so often just to make sure it fitted nicely. And then lastly I cut the Adam's apple off, so that the helmet protruded ever so slightly more than the neck did. After that, I dry fitted the right arm and realised that it didn't quite fit right, so I shaved the armhole down ever so slightly around the edges with my scalpel till the right arm had a flat surface to glue to. I then moving on to the left arm, I found that one of the muscles was too much of a bump, so again, I cut it down till there was a flat area to connect the arm to. I then attached the head and power pack to the model in order to make sure that the arms didn't interfere with the power pack. Moving on, I next attached the left arm to the model with plastic cement. You will likely need to hold the parts together till they get tacky and stick, or find a good way to stand the model up with the arm in the position you want in order to ensure a good bond forms. I then attached the shoulder pad. This one was sourced from the Possessed kit. After that, I moved on to the right arm, again attaching it with plastic cement and holding it for a bit to ensure it stuck before attaching the shoulder pad, overall creating a pose similar to that if the character was leaping off of the tactical rock that he is obligatorily stuck to. I then left the model to dry for a few hours before coming back to it. Once this has happened, I moved on to the sculpting. You can leave this part out if you would rather, as it isn't wholly necessary. I just like to add a little bit more visual flair to my models. I started off by making my sculpting medium of choice, Grilliput, or Miller stuff. Whatever you want to call it, it's a 50-50 mix of green stuff and Milliput. I personally prefer this as it has the best qualities of both, however the only problem I have found with it is it has a lack of adhesive ability when compared to regular green stuff. With the first batch of Grilliput I wanted to sculpt a secondary part of the loincloth on his back, and 2 reams of parchment on his front, not too dissimilar to the Dark Apostle. To do this, I started by rolling out my Gorilla Putt on a well-lubricated plastic surface. I personally used this old Ziploc bag and water as expected. I then took a flat surface and pressed it down, again using water to keep my surfaces well lubricated. The tool I used was just 2 bits of thick plastic card stuck together. Again, it's simple and it works. Once the pieces had been flattened, I then took my hobby knife and cut it in half, before then scoring some lines on one side to make it look more tattered. I then applied the 2 pieces to the back of the Chaos Lord, the one without tatters on the bottom and the one with tatters on top. Following that, I performed the same steps again of flattening out a strip of Gorilla Putt, but this time I used a thinner strip as these were to form the parchment on the front. I again scored some lines at the base, using my hobby knife to add some detail, and then I attached them to the front of the torso near each shoulder pad. Lastly, for this stage, I used a silicone tool to move both of the sculpted elements into a flowing backwards pose with the model some more dynamism. I then placed the model face up in an area that would allow the Gorilla Putt to partly use gravity to help him cure in the shape. I then left it to fully cure overnight. The last step was to sculpt the candles. I did this by taking some Gorilla Putt cylinders that I had made earlier and left to cure fully, and cut out a few shortish, random lengths that felt right for candles. These were then superglued onto the power pack and shoulder pads. Once the superglue had dried, I mixed up another batch of Gorilla Putt, this time with more green stuff than Milliput to improve adhesion. I then rolled out a tube long enough to wrap around the base of the candles, and pushed it into place with sculpting tools, creating wax strips and blending it into the stem. I can make a video on how to sculpt candles in future, just please let me know in the comments if that's something you'd be interested in. Following this, the next step was to sculpt the top of the candle. I did this by first applying superglue to the top of each stem, and then attaching a small blob of Gorilla Putt, which I then flattened on top and blended into the stem again, creating some more, drips in the candle. Lastly, I then took a round top sculpting tool and placed a divot in the top of the dome, ready for the fire. I then left this to fully cure for a couple hours before coming back to it. For the fire, I took a teardrop of pure green stuff, and with a small dab of superglue, I attached the teardrop in the small divot I'd made in the last step. This was then pushed slightly backwards, again to create an illusion of movement. And finally, for a bit of added flair to the model, I found these brass chaos symbols by Greenstuff World, and attached 2 to the parchments on the front to create an almost mockery of a purity seal, and I cut one in half with a pair of old hobby snips to chaos up the cataphractii parts I had used. For the base, I used one of the bases I made in last month's video, so if you haven't had a chance to watch that yet and you would like to, please feel free. If not, no pressure. Thank you for watching this video nonetheless. I attached the model to the base with a blob of green stuff that I then textured with an actual rock to blend it into the tactical rock, and I then left that to fully cure. And then, with that, the model was done. Thank you so much for watching until this point, I really appreciate it. I have now been on YouTube for 2 months and I'm quite enjoying it so far. Please like and subscribe if you want to, and I wish everybody a wonderful day. But here is the finished model.